Chevra, good to vach. Great to be here with the Oilam. We are back in Rebbe Nachman, Likutei Moharan. The Oilam should get the Rebbe Nachman from the shelf. Le'ilui Nishmas, Rebbe Aaron Ben, Rebbe Melech Hirsch, Schus Yegen Aleinu. The elevation of the soul of my wife's grandfather, Rebbe Aaron, son of Rebbe Elimelech Tzvi, the survivor. Auschwitz gave our family so much. Likutei Moharan is Le'ilui Nishmasai. And we're going to start a piece. It's probably one of the first longer pieces we're going to see in Rebbe Nachman. We've seen a lot of shorter pieces, but now I want to kind of dig our teeth into a real piece that's going to take us probably 2 weeks, maybe even a little bit longer. Of course, it's going to be Purim Dik. But like a lot of things in Rebbe Nachman, you don't necessarily know where he's going in the beginning. You'll see from the first line, it'll be very Purim Dik, and all of a sudden Rebbe Nachman will just go in seemingly a different direction, and then you're going to see him pull the whole thing back around. That's like we've been explaining classic Likutei Moharan, is Rebbe Nachman will make an unbelievable statement, and then he'll go in a different direction seemingly. But all that was to explain the original idea, and this is going to take us into Purim. We'll probably finish this before Purim and then go on to another Purim Dika piece. This is also going to be very, of course, Parshas Yisro Dik, and the name of the piece is Parshas Mishpatim, Eila Mishpatim. So I want the Olam to go in the first section to Torah Yud. Mamish right near the beginning of the Sefer, Torah Yud. And I want to give you a little bit of the context, because everything in Rebbe Nachman was not just what was said, it was when it was said. And the context of this piece of Torah Yud, it's called the Eila Mishpatim, was said in a time that there was a lot of gezeras, there was a lot of decrees that were coming against Klal Yisrael, especially that they wanted, this was in the times when we didn't really have freedom of expression in Russia, and they made forced education, that we weren't allowed to learn Torah. They made that there had to be certain subjects that were taught in the schools which went against Torah beliefs. There was also forced conscription to come into the armies, and of course those weren't very religious Torah places. And there was a lot of din, a lot of intense things happening, like there have been over the generations against Klal Yisrael. And the backdrop of this Torah is preserving the authenticity of the wisdom of Torah, even when people are trying to fight against it. So you're going to see, of course, this is going to take us into the Purim theme, because Haman himself, Amalek, is attempting to kill every single man, woman, and child on a single day. And he didn't really care if you decided that you wanted to do something else. You have a Jewish parent, so similar to Hitler, Yimach Shemo. If you have any seed of Jewishness in you, so then forget about it, stop. So we're going to see, just keep this in mind as the backdrop of things. So everyone have Torah Yud, the Eila Mishpatim. Okay, like I said, it's going to be a bit of a journey. You're going, I think, for the first time, going to get a taste of going on a bit of a journey with Rebbe Nachman to see how he takes us through a piece. So it's going to be, hold on to your tzitzis. It's going to be a journey. It's going to be mamish, an adventure. Some things will be technical, some things will be, but just hold on tight. Allow Rebbe Nachman to take us. Ve'ela mishpatim asher tosim lifneim. Of course, this is next week's parsha, and these are the mishpatim coming off Kabbalas HaTorah. Next week, we're going to go into the details of the Bein Adam L'Chaveroi, interpersonal relationships, how the Torah is not just a grand Har Sinai experience, but it relates to daily life and is relevant in the most minute of interpersonal relationships and damages. Aleph, says Rebbe Nachman, Kisheyesh chas v'sholem dinim al Yisrael, when chas v'sholem there's din on Yisrael. Din means that there's things that don't look so good. There's judgment. There's things that are not so good coming on Yisrael, which means things that are concealing God in the world, which could include forced conscription to do sins, could include making it prohibited to teach Torah and free speech, and taking away First Amendment rights, etc. Where there's this restriction, this severe judgment. In this case, you cannot teach Torah, and you must teach other values. That was what was happening at the context of this time. When there's, God forbid, chas v'shalom, dinim al Yisrael, and din always means when I don't necessarily see Hashem. When Hashem is concealed. So look at the prescription. So Rebbe Nachman, in his classic form, is going to make seemingly a wild statement, and then we're going to have to work out what this really means. Ali de rikudim v'amchos kaf al kaf, through dancing and clapping. Nasam tokas adinim, you could sweeten all the judgment. End of statement. Having a wonderful day, guys. Okay, thank you so much. It's been great here. Like, Rebbe, what does this mean? Rebbeinu, don't worry, he's going to take us on a journey. But I'm giving you the feel of Rebbe Nachman. He'll make statements like this, and we're going to have to work this out. Somehow, through dancing and clapping, this is like, I'm sure the Misnagim will love this stuff. Like, oh, the Hasidim, you dance and clap, and it's all going to be fine. Okay, there's going to need to be a process to understand what's being said here. But that's a bit of a, provocative statement. It's, whoa, dancing and clapping is going to remove judgment? Okay. Now, we're only going to get to the answer at the end. It's going to take us like 15 hours of learning. But if you hold on, then you're going to see what's really going on. Beis. Ki ikr gedulosai shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You know when Hashem is great? Hashem is always great, but when the world sees the greatness of Hashem, Shagama okum yedu sheyesh elokim shalat u'maisho. When all of humanity knows that God runs the world. Meaning, Hashem's greatness, and like we mentioned, we made a general statement. Now Rebbe Nachman's going to start taking us on these side boulevards, seemingly not related, and he's going to connect everything together in the most wondrous masterpiece. Hashem is great when the entire of humanity recognizes that Hashem is in charge of everything. Meaning, what would I have thought? Not only when the righteous people of the world recognize Hashem, that's not when he's great. Obviously, the righteous people are going to recognize Hashem. But what about when all of humanity, and let's take it further, what about when people are really far from God, the furthest people, the ones who fight God, the ones who fight morality, the ones who say there's no rhyme or reason for this world. The ones that say I could do whatever I want, it feels good, do it. I don't have to answer for any of my actions, as long as I don't hurt anybody else, more or less. When all of those people recognize God, and all the big institutions of the world put down their flags of self-righteousness and start flying a flag of Hashem Echad, that Hashem runs the world, that will be the true sign of Hashem's greatness. In the places where Hashem was so far pushed away, wherever they're giving out PhDs for Bible criticism and God denial, when in those very academies they start flying a flag of Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, exactly there. And Shmuel ben Yamin Harris jumps up and says, Rabbi Sai, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. When he does that, then God will be great. Then God will be great. And all the gurus in India put down some of the idol worship, and they scream out to the hundreds of millions of people, Hashem is one. That will be the sign of God's greatness at that moment. Now watch this from our parsha. Says in the Zohar, Kad ase Yisroi ve'omar. You know when God became great? This week's parsha, Yisroi. When Yisroi came on the scene, Ki ata yodati ki gadol Hashem. Now I know that God is great. Now, anybody know what was Yisroi's background?
Wasn't he a righteous skewer? He was a huge
So he was one of the inner council, one of the advisors of Paroi. Yisroi was the biggest rebbe of idol worship in the world. He was a priest who tried every single idol worship there is. Mamish. There was not one idol worship that he didn't get his hands on. He tried everything.
You know sorcery?
He knew everything. Oh yeah, sorcery, big time. Black magic, sorcery. He was one of the inner chamber. Him and Bilam. They were on the inner council. Love him. Like the real hardcore guys. Like the ones that you want to stay away from. Like the really scary ones. Where the evil of the world is like right there. Is very strong with them. Yisroi was one of those guys, and he did everything. And this week's parsha, when he heard what happened with Kabbalah Satira and with Kriyas Yamsuf and the war of Amalek, the Yishma, Yisro, and Yisro heard it. There's a question why he heard. Didn't everybody know what happened? The answer is they all did. But Yisro somehow chapped something more. And then the parsha says, Ki ata yodati ki gadol Hashem. And now I know that Hashem is great. What happened at that moment? Hashem became so big. Why at that moment did Hashem become big? Because the person who was the furthest from Hashem, maybe in the entire world, said Hashem is great. Yisro himself, and he was given a parsha in the Torah named after him. How many parshas in the Torah are named after a person? Not that many. And Yisro has one. That's pretty good. And not only does Yisro have a parsha, which parsha is it? The Kabbalah said the Matan Torah. And not only that, Yisro what? He becomes Moshe's advisor. It's nifla. Yisro heard something, and Hashem became great, not because Moshe Rabbeinu said Hashem is great, not because the righteous of the generation said Hashem is great. The lowest person of the generation, the one who was the most steeped in evil, of concealing God in the world, that he recognized God. That is amazing. And the Zohar says on this, Kedein es Yakir v'yis'ale shma ilo. At that moment, Hashem's name became great, and it started to go up. The whole world started to see, oh, there's something big here. From Yisroi, from the furthest person. You can see that Rebbe Nachman is hinting to something, because in the world at that moment there was very intense evil decrees being put on Klal Yisrael, as there are in every generation. Hashem Yirachem. And only will the final greatness come when the people who are the furthest away fully recognize. That's why every good Chassidish story ends that the biggest misnagid, the one who was like fighting the Rebbe, becomes the biggest chassid. That's how they all end. Everybody knows that, right? The one who totally couldn't stand the Rebbe, that he is the biggest of the chassidim, right? That's how every Baal Shem Tov story ends. Okay, and that's how the ultimate story is going to end. The people who are the biggest fighters are going to become the biggest Hasidim. Okay? Because that's where the revelation is the greatest. Because it's the furthest distance. It's not a grace a glick like we say when you say that Hashem is in the base medrash. Hashem is great, but when somebody who's so far can say that, it makes a big, big deal. Another cryptic statement from Rebbe Nachman. The way that humanity will come to recognize Hashem is through this Kabbalistic idea called Yaakov, Jacob. Now we're going to have to explain that because that seems cryptic and like in code. And the reason is because it is cryptic and coded. But in the language of Kabbalah, Avram represents kindness, Yitzchak represents judgment, and Yaakov represents Rachamim or Torah or Tefillah. Yaakov has this middle unifying quality of Rachamim, which we're going to talk more about, but it's enough now to just get the code, which is humanity will come back to Hashem through Yaakov. Let's talk about Yaakov. What is Yaakov? Why him and not Avram and not Yitzchak and it's going to ultimately be the power, the qualities of Yaakov Avinu, of our forefather Jacob. So we're now quoting from the Navi. Kamaisha Kosav Beis Yaakov Lechuven El Chabiyar Hashem. The prophet Yeshayahu says that we're going to go up to the house of Jacob. Why doesn't it say the house of Avram? The house of Yitzchak. Now, what are we referring to when we say this, the house of Jacob? To the Beis HaMikdash. The house of Jacob, the Beis HaMikdash, we're all going to go up to the holy temple in Jerusalem to experience the light of God. Yaakov revealed Hashem more than all the other avos. How is that? Well, on a simple level, how many people did Avram Avinu reach? He reached a lot. In the time, everyone should open up the Rambam, the beginning of Hilchos Avodah Zarah, the laws of idol worship, where the Rambam gives the history of Abraham and the world that he came into, which was steeped in idol worship, and where idol worship started. And Avram Avinu comes onto the world stage, and he started telling people, Aboisa, my dear friends, middle of the Chassidish Tish, brought people in, Tu B'Shvat, eat some paradise. Hashem is one. He's one. We don't bow down to the sun. We don't bow down to the moon. Even though they say that, why can't I bow down to the moon? Is the moon not an emissary of the king of all kings? They had an interesting point. They said, if the king has emissaries, if the king has generals, is it not respectful to honor the generals? I'm asking you, is it not respectful? The president, if the president has high-ranking generals, is it not a respect to the president to honor the generals? Yeah, because the generals work for the president, we hope. And if they are, then there's a respect to the president because they're part of that system. So they said, why can't I honor the son? The son is an emissary, is a general of the king, of Hashem. The problem was, they said, let me just go to the intermediary, because who am I to go all the way back to the source? And Hashem says that's the beginning of idol worship. Because you're right, the sun does give you things, right? Would we be alive without the sun? No, it would be a very cold place. Would we be alive without the rains? No, you need rain for food, for sustenance, to live. We wouldn't be alive. So we need the rains. But who gives the rains? So you'll say the angel of the rain. Well, who gives the angel of the rain life? Hashem. So what happened in the sequence of idol worship is they started just going to the intermediaries. We'll go to the angel of the rain, the angel of the sun, and we'll start relating to them. And these are powerful beings. These are real. There's real stuff going on here. They have names. There's a whole. Don't mess around. Certain peoples who are still doing ceremonies where they're arousing the rain spirits and the spirits of the sun, and they're dressing up with different animal headdresses to create relationship with those spirits. That's real idol worship, because they're going to that intermediary, sometimes on psychedelic stuff, to go and have a relationship with that angel, with that spirit. Now, you might say, but it's so holy up there, it's so spiritual. It is, compared to a guy who's like, oh, I'm in the rat race of this world. This pulls me out of my stress of this world. I want to go relate to the eagles, the eagle spirit, and the sun spirit, and the moon spirit. And a person who starts going to that place, he starts feeling that there's something going on, because there is something going on. Hashem set up a whole system of powers there. But what did Hashem say? He said, you're right, I set up the system like that, but not that you should go to them for your needs. You should come directly to me, to the source. I'm giving this as the backdrop of where Avram Avinu came into the world. And Avram Avinu started to tell people, Hashem Echad, Hashem is one. He's one. Don't go to the spirits. All those spirits are being run by Hashem. You can go right to the source. And he started to help people. But he only helped so many people. Yitzchak went in the way of his father. Isaac helped more people. But Yaakov was able to get to the most amount of people, Yaakov Avinu, and he was the beginning of Yisrael, which would now create Mitosai Shlema, an entire army, an entire nation of people that would receive the Torah, that would now be responsible for bringing all of humanity back to Hashem. Nothing short of literally a light to the nations to bring everybody back to that consciousness of Hashem Echad. So look the way Rebbe Nachman explains it based on a Gemara. All the Avos had three ways of referring to Har HaBayis. They referred to the place of the temple in three different. I love that I can just do this, and it's not figurative. Over there in Jerusalem, Mamish Rabbeisai, right here. To thank Hashem so much, right here, Mamish. And to yearn to be here. There's people that could be so far physically, but they could be closer to Jerusalem. And you could have people who are in Jerusalem, but they're somewhere else. They could be further than somebody sitting in, downtown Chicago, New York, Tokyo, Paris, Rome, wherever. Because they're yearning for Yerushalayim, they're even closer than us. So we have to yearn for it. So look at the Gemara. Ki Avram Karu Har. Avram Avinu called the place of God, the Temple Mount, a mountain. Is a mountain something that's like general admission, general population, or is it more kind of out there? A little bit more out there. The mountain is always a distant place. And therefore, Avram Avinu brought God to people, but it was still distant. It was like a mountain for people. It was there, but it was like I had to go to the mountain still. But I could find God now. But it was like a mountain. Yitzchak Karosada, the Gemara in Pesachim. Yitzchak called the place of God a field. Like it says, V'yetze Yitzchak lasuach basodeh. Yitzchak went out to have a conversation with God in the field. Is the field a little bit closer than a mountain for people? There's more people in the field. The field is where you farm. The field is where it's more easily accessible. Your house is near the fields. We need fields more than we need mountains. A field is where you grow your crops. A field is closer to people than a mountain. But Yaakov Karubayis. Yaakov Avinu called the place of the temple a home. A home. A home is the most relevant place. It's the closest place. It's a place that we can all relate to Hashem. Okay, Rabbi Sai, we're just beginning this piece. Get ready. Somehow you're going to learn how clapping and dancing is part of fixing the entire world, and he's going to take us on quite a journey until we get there. We should be zoicha mamish to fix all the dinim and sweeten it on name. Gute Woche, Chevre.